Hey class. So week 5, we're gonna do kind of two actual areas of interest this week, and look at a study that's the pinnacle of absolute scientific integrity, the Pepsi Challenge. So the first half of this lesson is going to be dedicated to validity. Validity is generally broken up into excuse my teaching assistant here. It's usually broken up into two primary concepts. There's internal validity and external validity. The questions really are just kind of broken up into, how well does this study measure what it set out to study or measure? And how useful is this outside of this specific study? Internal validity would be the first question. How well did it measure what it meant to measure? External validity is how useful is it to the outside world? We call this second concept generalizability. And that's really, kind of going to build on your stuff from last week about how well they sampled. Because if you're going to do a study on living room color preferences for all left-handed people that live on, Minnehaha Avenue between 2 blocks, whose last name is Smith. Yeah, that's great. It's extremely specific. You definitely set out to measure something specific, but is it really helpful outside of that extremely specific population? Obviously, that's a little intense, but it's really helpful because when you have a sampling problem, that's whenever your generalizability starts to kind of go down. So that's going to be what you start with. And then we're going to move into something that is kind of, a big ongoing back and forth in research, especially psychology research, and that is qualitative versus quantitative research. And the reason that these are paired together is because they deal very much with the concepts of control, study design, and generalizability. So keep that in mind. Quantitative research is, if you have a hard time remembering the difference, quantitative has an N, and N is for numbers. Quantitative takes things, it's very clean, it's very controlled, it's very numerical, and it lends itself to these giant populations, so it can be extremely generalizable. Qualitative might be something that you're more interested in as a counselor, because it's commonly actually done by counselors, practitioners, and that's more of an in-depth, very small sample size, where you're actually gleaning very detailed information, usually narratives, case studies, interviews, things like that. So you're going to have a little bit of a debate on qualitative versus quantitative. Spoiler alert, they're both important. They just have two very different roles. So you're going to go over that. Your discussion is to watch the Pepsi Challenge, which is included in your lesson, and discuss the merits and weaknesses of its validity. So obviously more of a fun discussion this week. Feel free to have a little bit of fun with it, but take it seriously, go through, critique it, pull apart the Pepsi Challenge, whatever you want to do. If you have any questions, as usual, please feel free to contact me on the discussion board or via email. This is starting to get into a little bit more technical stuff, so feel free to ask any questions. I'm more than happy to. Make sure you're taking the time to tie this back, and how is this helping you? As a practitioner, validity is very important for two reasons, and I kind of give you those two questions to ask yourself. You're setting out for research that answers a specific question that you need answered as a practitioner. Does the study actually answer that question for you? It might say it does, but does it actually? And secondly, again, this kind of goes back to last week. If you're studying a special population, make sure that they're actually results that you think could be generalized. So for example, if you're studying aging hippies in Northern California and their political preferences, finding an article on political preferences, that might be great. And in an aging population, excellent. But if you're looking at an aging population in an extremely conservative part of Wyoming, it's probably not very generalizable to your population. So this is why, you're going over this. That's why it's important. So you guys need to make sure you're taking the time, think of and reflect on how you would use this as a practitioner. Again, have fun with it. Drink your Coke or your Pepsi while you're doing the discussion, and I will see you guys next week.